Welcome, beekeepers. It's Key zooming in from the ancestral land of the Lumbee people in central North Carolina. Today, we want to extend our warm welcome to Desiree DeMars. Desiree DeMars, she's going to share with us what she is willing to about her wonderful work, and we are going to have a conversation on today, our wonderful Nosara celebration, the beginning of spring.
Oh, thanks, Key. Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. This land here is, I want to say Chippewa, but it's Cherokee. I mean, mainly, but I know there's a half a dozen. If you really do some diving in, there's probably were half a dozen different tribes that roam this land. But the main tribe that people resonate with, and there are many in Asheville, North Carolina, this area, are the Cherokee. And so, yeah, really honor all those Native people who roamed this land and actually made it possible, right, for us to be here for whatever reason, sometimes the convoluted reasons, but, here we are. And yeah, I feel honored too that it is, this first day of spring. That's pretty amazing that we're talking on that day, because just previous to the call, we were just talking about these amazing times that we're in. So how would you like to begin
If you're willing, just maybe share with our audience how your work supports our collective. We are working a lot in the divine feminine, and I love all of your work. I know you're a sacred artist and you do a lot of spiritual ceremonies. So I'm curious, how do we embody the earth more? How do we improve those relationships?
Okay, yeah. Well, it's fascinating because that's a great question. And I feel like it's a huge question. And it's also I don't know that there's one answer, it's like, I think the beauty of who we each are is that just like nature, right? And that's the truth about the natural world, isn't it? That unity is diversity, that we are such diverse creatures, each of us, right? And each of the realms and the worlds within these greater realms. And then the truth we know is that we're cosmic beings, so we're in part, like we talked a little bit about this before we started, is that we're stardust, right? We all came from somewhere else too, or we're all these particles or these pieces of us. We are part of something so much bigger. And I think this is what the awakening and this particular time in history that we've never experienced before in this way is that, we're rediscovering that we're cosmic beings, right? We're beings of light. And so I don't know that there's any way we could not be, aligned with nature more, but I think, part of that answer is really about rediscovering our own truths, each of us, right? Like how we express that, because we all express it differently. So I feel like my work has always been about that. Like, even though I've done so many different kinds of trainings, whether it was like through energy work or, I taught yoga for 25 years, Pilates, studied flower essences, aromatherapy oils, the list just goes on and on. I could probably wallpaper a wall with all the certificates, but, it's not really about that. What I've learned through the years, it's not so much, whoa, I got another training. It was really about, kind of that funny feeling. I'm sure most of us had, like, when we go through like a shift in our life or an evolutionary point in our life, you start to question things, and then you're like, well, why did I do that? Or why did that happen? And then, somewhere along the line, you realize, like, well, I had to do that and that, or be with this person and that person, or live in that place because there was some kind of information or lesson learned, right? Something that we gained, that if we didn't have that, it wouldn't have brought us to the next point, right? To the next place. So I think it's all valuable. And, but of course, the more we're connected to nature, like you're saying, is the more we can tap into that information. Because what I'm realizing now, part of my journey now, I was sharing with you earlier, is really looking into the intelligence and the language of water, the information that's in water, because really we were all birthed out of that water. And I think even with, gosh, I see the connection to, I've been doing a lot of ancestral healing work the last several years, especially since COVID, participating and supporting others in doing ancestral work. And what I realized with COVID, when I was working with a group, was that this virus, which, you know, so many people are like, oh, this bad virus, it's terrible, we must kill it, right? We must destroy it so that we can be healthy or be whole again. And that nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is there's so much knowledge and wisdom in this virus. So what we did is we journeyed to the virus. I had no idea I was going to go here today, this conversation.
I love this. You journeyed to the virus. I have so many questions. Okay, so what happened? And I'm so fascinated.
Things happened on multiple dimensional levels. So you can imagine, because the group was, this was a group work I did with, now I wasn't facilitating. What was fascinating is that there was a group facilitated by another shaman. There were probably about 1,200 people or 1,400 people involved. So we were on Zoom, you know, because it was COVID times. Mm-hmm. And the woman who was the guest speaker was a scientist who studies viruses and bacteria. But in shamanic terms, you know, and she's a shaman. So what was beautiful is because she's a shaman, she knew the other side of, you know, the language of bacteria and viruses. And in shamanic terms, we call them the smalls. So when you're connecting with the world of the smalls, what you realize is they have wisdom and information too. They were here long before us, right? So many of us, I'm getting chills just talking about it, my head's itching, that I realized, you know, this virus, in fact, we came out of this amniotic fluid that was filled with bacteria and viruses, not because it was there to harm us, but because it was there to support us and educate us on an elemental level, right? An electrical, in fact, because we're electrical beings, right? It was like we were infused in this fluid with this information, ultimately to support us to be stronger, right? To know like, hey, when you get into the world, there's going to be stuff like this. Because it all exists, right? It's all here. And in fact, it's part of the water that we came from. And so, you know, take what you will of that information. Hopefully, you know, when you're young, you can retain that information and it would build your immune system. I mean, ideally, that's what it was there for. Just like we were going to drink our mother's milk and then get even more information, right, from that about how to build our immune system, because then she's giving us information about the worlds that, you know, she's been in. We know ancestrally that, I mean, it probably goes back, you know, more than we can even imagine, but we know there's been research through therapists who studied African tribes that at least, you know, 4 generations, 7 generations of information is passed on, you know, genetically. That's what it's about. It's about getting this information. So I think the nature, you know, the natural world, what's important, like you said, how can we merge more with it or be a part of it, is like when we do these kinds of things, like work in our garden or, you know, work with water or whatever the elements are, when we start communicating with them, we'll get information back. And I think the learning curve we're all going through now, part of it is to just remember these different ways, you know, these different languages, these different ways of speaking, communicating, and receiving. So to go back to the other piece of the shamanic, the ancestral healing work, I had a personal ahas, like not only information about that, about, wow, we've got to really embrace this. If we just think of what a different world or experience it would have been with COVID, if we had said, wow, this is really going to teach us something, let's figure it out instead of try to destroy it. You know, this is what we have to change, I think, evolutionarily, is like stop the war, stop the fighting, and definitely stop the fighting against the feminine wisdom, because the feminine, just by her nature, right, of knowing how to create life, this is what we need to know, right, to move forward. So I had a big flash and aha during that session too, in the journey, where I remembered that when I had, and this will tie beautifully into the piece of work I do, which we're going to talk about, the readings, is that when I did my initial year of study, I mean, I'd already been doing shamanic healing work for many years, but then I had always, when I first discovered reading the bones through another colleague of mine, I knew the moment I saw her reading the bones, I was like, what, I'm going to do that one day. I just know, I don't know how, but I'm supposed to do this. I felt like I already knew how to do it, but I wanted to study with her. So, and then of course, through the years, I got exposed to divination on different levels. I happened to have a couple of key clients of mine many years ago in Chicago that were African shamans, and they kind of took me under their wing. It was like, it was this beautiful give and take, because I was working with them as a massage therapist and a yoga teacher. And then they would invite me to their ceremonies, and I learned about their method of divination, which was I believe it was Zulu too, it's called Ifa, the practice of Ifa. And they are totally, that's all they're about, is the nature spirits. That's how they live their life, right? Guided by those influences, right? So yeah, so that was kind of my awakening about the divination too, just because their process was a little different. So then when I saw this other process of reading the bones, which is also an African, of an African lineage, a Zulu tribe. This woman studied for 15 years in Africa, and then I studied with her. Well, when I had my initiation, the day of my initiation, and we did a ceremony together to complete our work together, I remember sitting there and just like tears start flowing out of my eyes, something that she was doing or saying, I don't even remember what it was, because I was kind of in an altered state. And I could think she asked me, we kind of went on a little, just a short little journey for me to like thank my ancestors and kind of this merging of our ancestors together. And I had this visual understanding of that our ancestors, yes, we may have known some of them, and we still do through our parents or whoever, grandparents, great grandparents. But they started to show me, my ancestors started to come in as just colors, just their energy forms, so it was like, okay, we exist also as energy, and it's not just like we have a name. In fact, when I eventually studied mediumship, what I realized was, when I go to that place where I can tune in to, cross the veil to tune into someone who is across the veil and wanting to communicate, they're not saying to me like, oh, my name is George and, blah, blah, blah. I get that information, but they don't say it that way. For me, that's not how I get it. I get it through like either hearing, I hear words, sometimes I get smells, and so that'll be an image. And then I see these images of colors. So I literally saw all of my ancestors coming forth into this. I didn't know at the time. I was trying to explain, and I did some drawings after, I remember. But then I realized that it was a vortex, that they were coming into this vortex and just showing me how we are so connected, right, in this. And we know then this toroidal field. And when I drew it out, I realized, oh, it's a toroid. And then I thought, oh my God, that is really the essence of all life, moves in a toroidal field, like our heart. We know through heart math studies that our heart field is bigger really than our brain field, right? And then that's connected. So when we go into a state of coherence, that's what we're really shooting for, right? Is to come into alignment so that we are like back again, one with this incredible field of wisdom, or like in, this is how I just see everything is so connected that it's called, what is it called? Family constellation work, which you might be familiar with. Yeah, the guy who started that, that's what he studied, African tribes. And you realize that though this constellation that we all are is really, right, vibration and color. And so when I had that aha, I noticed, that was a long time before this ancestral healing work I was doing. And then I was going to post something on our Facebook page after with the group about how powerful it was for me and how I felt it connected me to that experience. Somebody had just before me posted an image and she said, oh, she had had experience similar to that. And she said she called it the rainbow toroid, it's like, yeah, she said, I re-entered the rainbow toroid. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what it was. And I realized that's what I had experienced years before when I had my initiation into reading the bones. So, I think this connection that we're all expanding so much, that nature, whatever we're doing with the natural world, whether you be, I know like you're involved with, it sounds like horses and critters and, whatever we're doing with that, we are just keep gaining more and more information about the celestial being actually that we are, or this cosmic being that we have always been. And now we're returning, obviously, to do some kind of really deep work here together, right? I think people are so coming together right now to share whatever wisdom we do have, see how it's interconnected with others, and then bring that into something new, which is why it's so beautiful too, that we're here during a time of planting new seeds, right? And releasing the old in the way that just is just what no longer serves us, because we've all been subject to, in so many ways, multiple ways, many, many layers of just false information, right? Or conditioning that is not in alignment with the truth of who we are, or how reality truly is. And I think and I just see how maybe I'm just saying different things here because I see it's almost like a spoke of a wheel. People will relate on different levels through different kinds of experiences or different ways.
That's our collective. Yeah. We're all so, and that's where we're so strong, is there's so many different lenses. And one of the things I find so curious is that we are here today as we're actually entering the new year. We don't go by the Gregorian calendar, right? We're actually crossing over on a new moon into Aries with a new year. Aquarius is finally here, our collective consciousness. And so it's extraordinary. You talk about all the layers of so many, and the mind is very layered, and so is everything else, right?
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
And this collective is so magnificent in the totality. And we couldn't, I have to remind myself, I'm one body, one differentiated self, and I can barely hold all the energy coming in. And so I like the group consciousness because I need help holding all this. You said like it's moving very rapidly, right? And then Thursday, Pluto's now coming into the water bearer. So we're in really revolutionary times. And how do we hold it together? And so I wonder if you're willing to share, what is this reading the bones process? So if someone wanted to come to you and and do this, and we'll talk about a special offering that I'm so grateful that you are willing to do for our collective. But if you just, what is reading the bones? Because I can feel the energy of, I'm so curious about that. What is it? And how does it work? And what kind of things does it offer?
Okay. Yeah. Because it sounds a little weird. And some people, you say bones and they're like, what is she talking about? Why would I want to have anything to do with a bone? And so that again, that's multi-layered. Okay, bones, for one thing, is also symbolically, it represents our ancestors and this kind of information, and that we're electrical. Our bones are the antennas for the piezoelectric energy that runs through us as an electrical being. And because we're water, we're 90, and we talked about this a little earlier, 99% water molecularly. And so we need, the bones are what is transferring this information as we move. We know movement's essential, right? If we don't move, you don't prosper, right? You have to move. That's why I say, okay, so in my readings, I always start with intention. And that I say is about the I am presence. And that's because it keeps everything so simple. So I use it as a symbol for that. I is your intention. So whatever your intention is, we're bringing that to the reading, and I'll get to more information about the reading. But then A is the attention. So that's what we do have power to, right? We can, as a sovereign being, we can decide where we want to focus our attention. And we all know most of like the basic, when you start to get into, you know, any kind of personal growth, is you realize where your attention goes, energy flows, right? So we have our intention. We're going to place our attention on these symbols, these bones, which are part bones. And then M is for movement, because the truth is everything is moving, right? Everything is evolving. That is our nature. And this is what we've all, like science now has merged, you know, in the psychological realms to say, wow, you know, we're spiraling through space. Remember how most of us probably here learned, like, here's our little planet, we're going around the sun. And it's like, yeah, well, not really, you know, yes, maybe on some level we are going around, but we are spiraling, we know now, through space, like millions of miles an hour. And everything is evolving with us. We are moving with the whole cosmos, right? And we're on the spiral dance. So that is the truth about, if we're not moving, you're not, you know, it's like kind of like love and fear. You know, you can compress everything down. Like if you're not in a state of love, or these higher vibrations of truth, love, beauty, you know, gratitude, you're not really resonating with life itself, right? Then you're kind of stagnant. You're going through some kind of level of fear or death or holding on. So this whole process, I think, even of reading the bones, is really to help support us in understanding the potential and the power of symbols, and what symbols and the sacredness of our surroundings, and the sacredness of everything, right? It's not just, oh, these few things are sacred, and then the rest of our life is just, you know, some kind of weird stuff we have around us. No, it's to help us understand, you know what? Everything is sacred. Everything is alive at some level or frequency. And whatever that is that we tune into, where we put our attention, our intention, we will get the information back that we need, because it's going to reflect back to us something. It's going to reflect, because we're part of it and it is part of us. And so the beauty of reading the bones is like really it's a divination process, basically, which could be anything, you know, many people here today probably do, you know, use tarot cards, or, you know, maybe we use the I Ching, or, you know, astrology even is a divination process. Basically, we're looking at, you know, these elements of planetary beings or planetary influences. And so the bones are a collection of sacred objects. I'm going to grab them. I should have brought them over, but this is just an example, because of course everybody's collection is different. You know, that's the beauty of going through your own process. If it's something you want to study, is that your initiation, your understanding of the process itself is collecting the pieces. So mine is just, this is what mine looks like. Everybody uses different containers and different, you know, I use a cloth. Everybody has a different, whatever they desire to use for these bones to end up on the cloth. But you can see there are just things that speak to you or bring information to you. But some are bones. I use little bones, but they could be anything. They could be objects that you have. But what you learn is they are representatives of greater levels of information, right? Like the bones that I use are mostly ancestors. There are a few that represent some key initiations we all go through in our life. Other objects represent, I have coins in there that represent the planets. So I look at some planetary influences. There are pieces that represent the elements. So there's that. So it's basically, they're a collection of pieces that represent most of what we all share, right, as common denominators about life. And so the idea being that then when you have an intention and you blow your energy, use your breath. So part of our ceremony of getting into a reading is that you are blowing your intention into these bones, and then I shake them up. I throw them out on a cloth, and we look at the pattern. That's another thing, that's part of a divination, is that everything is in relationship. So that kind of goes back to that first question you had, the reason, why does divination work? Why would we even want to use it? It's because it shows us, it reflects to us a greater pattern that is there, right? And we start to look at this pattern, and then by looking, it's almost like mapping, mapping things out, because by seeing a pattern and then seeing ourselves in that pattern, we can start to say, gee, how am I in relationship to this? And how am I in relationship to that? So it kind of gives us a map. And I call it, once we get into the reading, there's one main piece there that I call, one of the key pieces is called a blueprint. And some people might say that about astrology, right? Like your chart is your blueprint of your life. This is the same way, these readings are like showing us a little snapshot of a blueprint of our life at this moment when we have this intention and we put our attention on it. And then we are asking, actually, I think, that information that comes to us from the reading is really about the movement, because that's what most of us want to know in a reading, right? Like, how should I proceed? How should I, what should I do about this? Which means some kind of action. So it also can reveal movement for us, like how should we move forward? Or it might reveal to us a reflection of like what we've done, which is why the ancestral pieces are beautiful. When you look at your ancestry, how it shows up in a reading, it can show you what's going on now and also show you what kind of happened in the past that brought you to the now. And then, of course, the beauty and the power really lies in how do you want to use that information, by saying, you know what, you're the creator in all of this. You asked for it, right? You're now receiving information here. How are you going to take this information and create the future? What are you going to do with the future based on this information? So that's how it can kind of reveal the past, present, and future information for you. And then you can decide what you want to do as the creator. What do you want to do with all of this information?
Yeah, and it's really resonating what you're saying too, about then having also these ancestral blessings of, we are the dream of our ancestors, and we're the living ancestors right now. I want to figure this stuff out while I'm here, not later. I want to do it while I'm embodied, so that my family line, right, and all those that I mentor and all of those people who I call family, receive those blessings when I'm not here in the physical body. And I'm curious about, it feels like, we talk a lot about Carl Jung and the collective, and how we all hold kind of our little piece. And I'm so fascinated about, like, if I have come to you and I have my reading of the bones, my intention is to shift my ancestral lineage, my future generations, into a place of, from my own beliefs, a place of Shambhala, where we all live in love and grace and community. Does that affect others around me if I get to that choice point that you're presenting, and then I say, I appreciate the blessings of my ancestors, and instead of going this way, I think I might follow this more loving feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question, because again, the answer is kind of, it's multidimensional, because things are happening simultaneously. And I think that's a part of what's happening in this evolution, this greater process we're all in, which is being revealed a lot through astrology right now, right? Is that when you make a choice, here you are in this lifetime making a choice, you have to realize you are not only affecting your life, and you're affecting, most likely, and it may not be how you might not see it the way you think you're going to see it, but you're affecting, your closest relatives. And in fact, you are affecting all the way down your ancestral line. There is something happening there. Even though you might not be able to see it with your eyes, energetically, there's something happening. And because that is also happening, it's almost like they're getting an upgrade because as you are, even though they're not here in a physical form, think of it that way, like they're kind of getting an upgrade just as you are. And then that's why when I said this movement is on a spiral, if you could kind of visualize that, I could see that, like, I was using my hand. I'm like, okay, if I think of my ancestors because of my intention here in this life, that information that I receive from them is getting a little bit of an upgrade. As I am expanding my awareness of what happened and why it happened, because some of us have so little information, right? We really don't have much because sadly, many of us here in the United States stopped living as families, like how many families live so much more collectively, right? Or we lived in tribes. And so we don't necessarily have that direct remembering, but energetically, it still is, it's elevating that. And then it's going to, you are going to make much more informed choices as you do choose whatever action you take from that information. So then your future generations will evolve. And that's kind of why I say, it's a spiral. It's not so much like we're just going around and around in a circle. It's really being elevated to new levels, new dimensions, new ways of understanding. And so and I think, I'm sure most people here, if we've done any kind of personal growth work or therapy even, I'm sure everybody here has a memory of some experience they had when they made some kind of a different choice, or even just had this a big aha about something. And just in their own integration process, then all of a sudden they notice how people might treat them differently or say something differently. And
Yes.
you didn't say a word to them. You didn't tell them anything, right? And you're just like, don't we all know that? Like, I've had that in family where I've said, done something, and then my mom will say, oh gosh, I decided to take a class in such and such, and I'm thinking, wow, if I had said that to her, she would have been, oh no, I'm not going to do that. But somehow on her own, just because I did something different.
Yeah.
It almost like energetically, I feel like what it does, it almost kind of gives it frees up the energy. It's like it gives others permission, you could also say, in a way, almost for them to, as you release this container or these conditionings that you were in, it goes down the line. They feel that release of energy, they feel that freedom, they feel that sensation, and they don't know how, because it's energy. It's
I love what you say too about your mother. That's one of the things we frequently discuss, that because time, in our mind's eye and in our calendar, it's so linear, and time, like, I can feel the freedom. That's my ancestor wall behind me. I don't know if you see all those pictures on the wall. Those are all, and I have my morning coffee and different things. Yeah. And it's just fascinating because I can sort of feel their pleasure, or I can feel their fear sometimes. And I say, okay, and that was your story, and it's a different time linearly. And then I can make different choices because there are more opportunities in some ways. Then, I'm so blessed. I mean, we get to have these emotions and talk about our feelings. My grandparents they didn't have that opportunity.
They did not.
They didn't have the words, the vocabulary just wasn't even there. And it's okay that I find the more spiritual work I do, the softer things get. The world is very kind. And it's one of those things, everyone is so kind. I think everyone's so wonderful and beautiful and nice. And a lot of people still are not having that experience. And so I'm curious about this, taking an intention to reading the bones. Like, one of the things I ask my ancestors is, what is the one thing I need to do today before I go to bed that moves us upward? That's all. What's one thing? Don't give me 10 because I'm very, I'll overtask.
Yeah,
So
you'll try.
though. And sometimes it's quite simple, like
Yes.
I would like that plant to be repotted, or it's really simple sometimes. And sometimes it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
We need to restore a relationship through an email and a conversation that follows it up, or whatever it is.
Totally. Yeah.
And those kind of things do come through in the readings of the reading of the book.
Oh, yeah, totally. In fact, here's what I'd say, like what you just said was so beautiful on many levels. This bigger picture, we know the time thing, that's huge. People recently have been saying, I can't sleep, I have tinnitus, whatever. We're feeling all this stuff, but we have to remember, this is again, like part of the upgrade. If we think, I know we say this like, oh gosh, we're moving from 3D to 5D. Well, you can't possibly move in frequency and have nothing else, nothing's going to change. Everything has to change. So it's like, then when you say, well, I can't sleep and I'm feeling this, and it's like, well, this is our affirmation that things are changing. So we have to kind of embrace it. That's part of it. And I know astrologically, if you just look at the symbols, Saturn, this whole thing, Saturn and Pisces, there's also a Saturn Pisces, a big thing going on there. And that is the part of time. So Saturn is Chronos, right? Saturn's all about time and structure. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's the father, it's authority figures. But, some of that is dissolving because this Piscean energy is all about the watery, intuitive, mysterious, right? And it's dissolving, right? There is a part of water that dissolves even through long periods of times, right? Everything breaks down as water flows around it or through it. So that's what we're all feeling. I think we're all, on some level, we're feeling this breakdown of time is not the same. I mean, I feel that each day. It's kind of like things I feel like super speedy, or all of a sudden I'll feel like just a time warp where it's like, whoa, it's like super slow or something. And I think that's when maybe we're kind of breaking through the veil a little bit, we're kind of like, whoa, okay, wait, you're like in that slow motion all of a sudden. So there's that happening. And I love what you said about your ancestors and your experience, of the one thing, because here, the basic, if you wanted to break everything down that you're doing and keep it super simple for your mind, the basic one thing would be being. How can you shift from doing? You said it perfectly, because if you got 10 things, you try to do it all. Because I think women are that way too, especially. We're gonna do everything we can do. We're super women, but it's like basically all you have to do is be. And that sense, the greater you can be a being, people will get what they need from it, or things will happen because of being in your presence. I always say that at the end of the invocation is that not only will you receive or I receive, may everybody that comes in contact with me also receive the benefits of whatever it is I'm getting here today, because we are getting, and here's a great example. We're getting so much information. We don't even know the half of it, right? And a great way to understand that is look at colors on the visual spectrum. We see red, orange, yellow, blue, green, violet, right? Yeah. But if you put that image there, you couldn't even just look it up on Google. You'll see like the visual imagery based on really what exists in colors. There's ultraviolet, right? There's some we probably don't even know. And I know people who have near-death experiences say this. They'll say, I saw colors that there's no such color. And they'll hear
it, right?
There was music.
I have people say, I heard that color.
Yes, or that kind of thing, that interchange. Or they'll say, the music that was playing is not like music that came from an instrument, And I've had that when I drum. Sometimes I'm drumming and people go, oh my God, what happened? And we'll hear like a chorus of angels. That's just one way I could explain it. You just, all of a sudden you'll just hear something breaks free in the field and you experience a little bit of that expanded state of awareness. So the beauty, again, I'll use my mother's example. This is great because I recently went to visit her in September. She lives in Chicago, well, a suburb of Chicago. And of course, part of the reason I went was just not to be with her, but I was going to help her with like a dozen different things because she's 89. She was turned 89. And so I was kind of like a little whirlwind, when I was there doing this, doing that, helping her with all these things. And when I left, one day we were having a conversation. She said, I thought to myself, she's like, gee, why is Desi, she calls me Desi so, like vibrant and healthy? She's like, because she's always moving. She said, and so, you know what I did? She said, it was so funny because one of the things I did is I looked in her trunk. I had a friend, she had some antiques that we wanted to let go of. And I had a friend come and look at them because she works with an antique guy, and she's looking them over. And they were all in my mother's trunk because she's had them there for I think years. I mean, I hate to say it. I think she had them in there for a couple of years, probably because of pre-COVID. And she was going to bring them somewhere, and then she never did because everything was shut down. So she said to me, after this woman came and looked at them and said, okay, I'll let you know. She said, you know what I decided to do? She said, one day it was like a beautiful sunny day. I went down to the car. I separated the things out of there, and I went to the Goodwill, and I just gave most of them away. And she said, and I realized that was because of just being around you and seeing like how you just moved through things, isn't that sweet? And I'm like, now right. So if I had said to her, Mom, you really need to empty that trunk, do you think she would have done it? Probably not. She would have been like, oh, I don't want to do that. But, just kind of like my being there, I realized not only did I do some things for her, but just by being with her, it inspired her in multiple ways. Because then later she also told me something that she did differently at the gym. We went to the gym together one day. And she was like, oh, you know what? I do this now. And I thought, I didn't tell her to do that, or I didn't suggest it. She just came up with that because, she just being in the presence of somebody else who did something a little differently. So I think this is how things will change and move through even a reading, because and how it can affect, your past and your future, just because it can energetically. And not because even ways that it can be beyond your understanding of why, right? Just the way that we can only see 7 or 8 colors, even though there's hundreds of colors in the universe. In fact, now I'll just throw this one more little thing in, which is incredible to even just think of. We have this new telescope, right, out in space now, called the James Webb, which is what's incredible about that telescope. If anybody wants to just go look up the James Webb telescope and see the kind of imagery that every day, you don't even have to be a fabulous photographer. You can take photos with these time-lapse equipment now, which isn't that expensive. And they are seeing images of what space and the cosmos looks like. And it's mind-boggling. It's just, it blows your mind. It's like all these things that you would imagine are, you've beyond your imagination, and colors. So they're just taking the data that's coming through the telescope. And the beauty of the telescope is that the telescopes we've had before only could go around the planet and stay in our atmosphere, right? Now that this one's outside of our atmosphere, it's not being affected by the heat and the other elements of the Earth itself. So it has more clarity because it's out in space. And so think of that. We're also we're getting information probably down the line in our future will change our future, beyond what we can even imagine, because we'll understand more about us being cosmic beings. But what I wanted to say about that too is that it's just what you were saying with the colors and the sound, is that when you see the telescope out there and we see space, it's just this black or dark, purpley, like nothing. It looks like just almost colorless. But then when you see the images and they put it through all this equipment to show the data of what the data is that it's bringing in, it's filled with like so many different, I would say, representations of light, of what light looks like, even though to us, if we're out in space, it just looks like darkness. Yeah. And I think this is what's being revealed too with this whole idea of, I think, you could see this in scientific studies of like what we thought black holes were, just nothing, like a black hole of nothing. Now we're realizing, whoa, maybe there's more black holes than there is space, of other stuff. So, I think we're just, this understanding of who we truly are. I feel like, the more and the longer I do readings, I'm just seeing that the symbology of it really somehow captures. This is where, our ancestors knew so much about the future, but in their own earthly, a more like earth-based way. But these symbols, these, like when you said young too, it made me think of, I've spent many years in a dream circle, a Jungian dream circle. And, we all know our dreams are the same way, right? We kind of step out of time, or we know that when we're first waking up from a dream state that we're in, we're shifting from these alpha and theta states. And, when you have that kind of moment when you're like, oh, I felt like I was still in the dream, but I was waking up, we know we're like in theta, and we're kind of able to see the veil, right? We're kind of like, wow, I'm in a dream, but no, wait, is this really happening? And I've had amazing things come through those moments. If you jot that stuff down. In fact, just a couple of years ago, I had a mind-boggling experience where I heard a voice when that happened to me. I thought, am I in the dream? I was talking in the dream. And then I thought to myself, right before I actually fully woke up, I thought, I was asking questions in the dream and somebody was answering me. And I thought, who is this? Who's answering those questions? That's what my last thought was as I woke up. And then I heard this voice. What did it say? It said a name, and it was I can picture the face. What was it? It was a Native American name. And I thought, okay, that's weird, but I just wrote it down and I didn't think anything of it. And then 2 days later, I heard that voice again. It said, Google it. And I was like, Google it? Where did that come from? And I thought, all right, when I wake up, when I get out of bed, I'll get to the computer and I'll Google it. And I Googled it. And sure enough, it was a real person. It was a woman who lived. She no longer is alive, but she was a Native American who had an incredible story about the work that she did in the world when she was alive here in this lifetime. So I thought, you know what? You can't, like, what's the saying? Some people say, don't poo-poo the woo-woo.
Yeah.
These crazy things that happen to us, you can't really just say, well, that's just crazy. It doesn't mean anything. I think we want to return to the honoring of the everyday, of these phenomena that happen to us, or even the simplicity of this information that comes to us when you're gardening, or when you're just like you're listening to your ancestors say, just do that one little thing before you go to bed tonight, or, tomorrow. That information is so important, and that's what's going to keep us connected to what we need to do in the future, or how we make choices, not like what we have to do, but how we're choosing to make our choices in the future, because that's critical right now. I think that's kind of that tipping point. A lot of people are talking about that. It's like, what are we going to choose? We're at this tipping point. Are you going to choose love, or are you going to choose fear? Are we going to choose the old way that really didn't get us very far? Or are we going to choose a new way, like take a chance? And I think, Key, this is something that I kind of jotted down, and I was going to try to remember, and see if I did, in relationship to maybe where we'll go next about, the reading and that, what we'll offer. But, let's see if it's going to escape me. The collective. Oh gosh, now it kind of like, I get like, it's like, okay. I don't know. I can't remember where I was actually going to go with that, but it was just like.
Well, if you remember it, you can always post it in the comments section on YouTube on our channel. Okay. And I know how busy you are. I just noticed the time because I could talk to you all day.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to, if we could talk, I'm so grateful because today, as we are, we have our new moon, so we're planting new seeds and we're going into the new calendar year. So we have, as our collective, we've been spending the winter doing our mind clearing, going inward, and now we are planting seeds and goals and wishes and really wanting, the harvest things that are going to come up around Beltane and over the summer. And I'm so grateful for your
Oh,
offering that you're
yeah.
going to hold for our collective on May 1st
Yeah.
in Beltane. And I wonder if you could just share, what would you like people to do to bring? It's going to be very limited because we are doing it live. Again, I'm so grateful because I know how busy you are, but I would
Great.
love to just share a little bit about that. And then I want to make sure that we say your website and
Okay.
where people can get a hold of you and your beautiful sacred art that you do as well. So what would you like people to bring with them? It'll be on our event page, which I'll put in the comments, but what would you like people to think about for our May Day?
Yeah, I think mostly, just think, something in your heart, that you deeply want to have clarity about or gain some kind of insight or wisdom. It could be, something about your future, or even something that's happening now that you want some clarity about. Because, it's what'll be interesting is you'll just see there'll be so much more than you can even have imagined. And then, but the beauty of the way I think I'm going to, what we've been talking about, how we'll set up the reading, is that with this limited number, each person actually, I will have a piece that I'm going to include in my collection, so that when we'll have the opportunity that way to look at a bigger picture for us as a collective, as a cosmic collective, but also individually, wherever that piece lands, you'll get to experience what I was explaining before of like a deeper level, another layer or level of a relationship to whatever is surrounding you. So wherever that piece that represents you lands in our spread when we throw the bones, I'll hone in on each of those. I will spend some time specifically on each one of those. So each person will get almost in essence to kind of see their own little cosmos there, like what's surrounding them in this moment in time. So you don't really have to bring anything per se for that. I will have, I think what we'll do in the, when we start to gather together and we're going to do our intent, put our intention together, and we do our ceremony, I'll have each person choose a piece. And so you'll just remember, where your piece is, and then I'll be able to just ask you, where do you see your piece landing? And then we'll talk about that little, that little niche, that little place of energy, that little energy field where your piece landed. And then you'll get an opportunity to have something even more personal, a deeper level, a deeper understanding of how maybe this bigger picture is surrounding you too. So that's the beauty of why we'll do a small group experience. And what I found too in groups is, there'll be something much bigger that comes through too, as a collective, so to speak, that we're gathering here in this moment as representatives to have this reading. Something will get unveiled about that too. And I wanted to share too, just like that I love that you're all beekeepers. I was a beekeeper at one time when I lived off the grid in the 70s. And one of the things I did was I had bees, and I loved that. And I had some really joyful learnings from that and some really intense learnings from that, because I had an experience at one time where the bees swarmed when my partner and I were showing the hives to somebody who was visiting, and I was just standing nearby. I didn't have any of my equipment on or anything. I was just watching them. And it was probably a really bad day to open. It was very hot and humid. I lived up on Lake Superior. So it was a very humid summer day, and they rose up, and then I think they saw me standing there and just went, "Whoa, who's that?" And they swarmed around me, and I got stung multiple times. And so that was an experience in itself. But I realized, I think physically what happened was that was like an initiation. I was thinking of it the other day when I shared this information with you about the reading, is that even those kinds of things, what might happen in the reading is you'll have recalls or memory maybe of an experience you had in the past, and you'll see how it's connected to the now, and you'll have a greater level of understanding of the medicine, I call it. And I feel like we all have that. I feel like I love to teach that in my shamanic work, is that you are your own medicine. It's like whatever you need to experience or have to get you to that next level or to support you in that next step it's all within you already. And, it's just, we can pull on that information. And I think a reading can help you with that. So, just bring with you your intention, however it is forming, and just know it could change. By the time we have the reading, maybe something else will come up. It doesn't really matter in some funny way, because again, I think it's like your presence being there in the reading is going to affect the reading. You're going to influence the reading just by your presence there. And then all of us bringing our attention together is going to bring another layer or level. So you'll see as I start to speak about the pieces, you might want to bring a journal. You definitely want to just be comfortable, be in a cozy place where you can just sit or relax and view, comfortably what we're doing. Fingers crossed that I got a new overhead camera, that it's going to work, and it would just give us a better view than me tipping the screen. But I use a second camera so that you'll be able to see the spread as if you had a bird's eye view. And then we'll have the recording. And I also like to take a picture at the end to just show, and you can have an image of the spread. So you'll get to experience the symbology of the pieces in relationship to one another. So really, if you want to take notes, bring a journal or you jot things down, and then hopefully we'll have a little time after the reading to have maybe some Q&A, so that if someone has a question, a burning question about, what they saw or what they experienced, we can address that too. Because what you'll find too is everybody will see. Think of this, like if we were sitting in a council together in a circle, everybody has a different perspective of what's at the center, right? Even though we're all looking at the same thing, you're seeing it from a different angle. And so we're going to all have that same experience, right? We're going to see the reading all at the same time, but everybody's going to see something different. So that'll be the beauty of maybe, Q&A or sharing after, is that somebody, will probably have some kind of insight that will be pretty, for profound for either them, or maybe even your collective will have. That's something we can include in our intention, is that maybe there'll be some wisdom that'll come through the collective about what you might do next to, in the evolutionary process of your collective. So
wonderful. And so if people wanted to reach out, I know you can share it in the chat if you want to. We'll also put it in the comments. But what is your website address? So if people want to find out more about your work or be in direct contact, how would they do that?
Yeah, it's really simple. It's my name. So it's just www.desireedemars.com. And it can be all lowercase, doesn't have to be written any special way. So it's not case sensitive, but DesireeDeMars.com. And then you can I have just drop downs, on it. So I have links to my shamanic work, my regression work, my sacred art, which you might be able to see some of it. You probably can't see the details, but on the ladder.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Some examples. So
Okay.
right now, through the years, I've been a visual artist for many years. I worked with beeswax and I still do. How I've kind of gone into using my beeswax. I did encaustic work, so I did paintings, and you can see some of that on my website. But then in the last few years, since I had a limited space with COVID, I lost my studio. So I thought, what could I do with my beeswax on a smaller scale? My pieces that I do, like rattles or talking sticks, those I incorporate beeswax somewhere on them. So usually somewhere where I have the symbols or a medicine wheel on it, I'll include beeswax on there. So yeah, and you can see those on my website too.
Perfect.
Yeah, pretty much the best place to go. And in fact, my link to my, if you really get into readings and you enjoy or want to maybe understand a little more about the experience before we have our group reading, I have a YouTube channel, and you can just click on a link right there on my first page that takes you to where I've done weekly readings for a long time. So you can just get an example of, I usually do like 15-20 minute reading every week about that. And now I'm kind of, and what I'm moving towards is doing them more in alignment with the sun and the moon. So I'm going to do new moon and full moon readings. And then hopefully on those in-between times, I will be adding maybe something more, a little more educational, so people can understand on maybe a deeper level, a little bit more about the reading itself and the symbols themselves, so they can get more out of a reading when they witness a reading.
Wonderful. That's right. I want to thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to be with you today. I've enjoyed this time.
I know, me too. Oh my, thanks, Kate.
And happy seed planting.
Yes.
And all of you, we will see you soon, and keep eyes out for the comments and register for the event. And just know it's very limited because it is going to be live. You'll be able to ask your questions.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I hope the timing works for people, for, people, and I'm sure whoever we have, it'll be the perfect amount and perfect group. And I know it'll carry over, like I said, to everybody's lives, to their personal life, and I'm sure the collective. It'll be really wonderful. And I'm thrilled. I feel totally honored that you, Key, are like a space keeper for something like this, the collective, and that we can merge, my work with that, because I think it will only amplify, whatever each of us is doing, and just really bring more ease and grace into the process. I think the more we're doing, the more we communicate and share this kind of thing, I think it just gets easier and easier for each of us to really be the seed carriers to others who are maybe just starting their journeys. Maybe we've all been kind of trudging along here, but there's many people that are just starting, right? And they're just waking up. So hopefully this will just amplify the field in a way, bring more light into it, so that it just reaches out to more people. Yeah, so thank you.
With those beautiful words. So we will be in touch, and may we all pollinate love, and may all beings benefit from our talk today.
Oh.